the U.S. Department of Labor has announced that it's going to be raising its hourly minimum wage to $15 an hour. And this will start January 30th, 2020, and it covers work performed or in connection with federal contracts. And I think that the reason that the government's had to raise minimum wage has been a function of a few different things. And I think it also signals important messages to the marketplace and to workers in general. The first, I think, is that it's a realization, at least at the government level, at the federal level, that inflation is real and it's probably not transitory. We can argue till the cows come home about the mechanics of how this inflation is working. And for the longest time, the Fed and the government's been signaling to everybody that this is transitory and that prices will come down relatively quickly. And I think for those of us who track labor, who track the economy, who track work, we see that wages have had to go up as a function of increased costs. But we're also seeing the effect that the money that's been pumped into the system over the last 18 months, we're seeing how that's affected prices, for one, and what that means at a wage level. Companies have had to adjust at least their compensation for workers, especially for those who are changing jobs, because people are seeing that their paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to. And so the first realization, I think, or the first thing that this federal level minimum wage jump signifies or signals is that inflation is real and that this is step one to combating what that is. The second thing, and I think it's a very important message as well, or lesson from this, is that this is a signal from the government that it's starting to realize that it's competing for the same talent pool that everybody else is. And so in a world where you have Amazon bumping up their minimum wage to 15, plus doing things like covering people's college and college tuition and other firms doing similar things, you've got the big professional services firms, the PwCs, allowing everyone to work from home indefinitely. Everybody, I think, on an aggregated basis is seeing retention as an issue, bar maybe the very top employer brands in the world, who probably on a net basis are net positive from all this turmoil that's happening right now. All companies are facing, a really difficult period right now when it comes to their human capital infrastructure, and I think the federal government is no different. And raising wages, I think, is a reaction to what's happening in the market. The kind of worker that the federal government needs to do, certain kinds of work is probably the same kind of worker that would be working at $15 an hour anywhere else. And so, yes, it's nice to cloak, this kind of a wage hike with the government, in terms of, we're trying to, be better to our federal workers and military service members and make sure that they have, the food and things that they need. But it's a reaction to the competitiveness that's happening out there right now. And so on a long enough basis, what we're going to see is that, okay, wages are going to come up. I think if the government puts something like this into play, then it really makes it hard then, I think, for most, smaller businesses who operate with a lower wage structure. Anything less than 15 at this point, I think, is difficult now to attract talent. So it's now raised the bar, or at least raised the floor, and whether they've decided this is as a function of or as a result of inflation or other reasons, I think it's just a realization now that as an economy in the U.S. at least, that 15 is the floor, and that everybody's going to have to compete at this level, and so it's interesting too. I think we're seeing the disruption in the market right now. It makes it very difficult for companies to compete, and the idea then that the government is also playing this game is interesting. It's very interesting from an employer brand standpoint and a human capital standpoint. Traditionally, you always feel like the government is insulated a little bit because of the pension benefits or some of the long tail benefits that happens as a result of somebody working for a long time in the government. But the marketplace is competitive right now, and people are leaving probably federal jobs to go to the private sector. Company or individuals and employees from smaller companies or finding jobs at larger companies. Larger companies are seeing almost an ability to pick and choose talent as they see, and so from an economic standpoint, when you think about what's going to happen, if rates go up, as they try and combat things like inflation and try and pull some of the money out of the system, what's going to happen at the top echelon of employer brands, where all these companies have on a net basis taken on a ton of employees over the last 18 months. One example that comes to mind is Peloton, the fitness equipment company. I mean, they doubled their headcount, and it's not an insignificant headcount. They're in the 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 in terms of headcount. They've doubled that size, so they were around 4,000 last year. And with the changes that we're seeing in the economy, where work from home is or at least the dynamics around work from home are changing, right? People aren't working out as much at home because they're eager to get out, and so you're seeing gym attendance or gym participation go up, and Peloton's had to cut its forecasts by a significant amount, and it caused their stock price to fall a significant amount, and it caused them to have to go on a hiring freeze, and the hiring freeze typically then signals, or if your first step is hiring freeze, but then it can always quickly bleed into layoffs. And so that's a brand that has a fantastic employer brand, especially over the last 18 months. It's an exciting area of the economy to work. When we see rates go up and these kind of bubble-like stock prices or bubble-like valuations fall, what happens to the employer brands at the top end of the economy? What happens to access to labor in the small to mid-sized companies is going to be interesting to see, and then also what happens at the federal level in government jobs. So, interesting story to follow. The update here is that the government is starting January 30th, 2020, bumping their minimum wage up to $15 an hour for federal contracts. And I think that it's a reflection of inflation. It's a reflection of the increased competitiveness in the labor pool, and that the government, just like everybody else, is competing for the same pool of talent that's hard to find right now.